Hi everyone, I'm Kaan, and today we are going to be painting the Aeon Trespass Odyssey Temenos, the first super big boss of Cycle 1 of the game. I'm going to be painting this model in a pretty simple and straightforward way in which that pretty much anyone can kind of follow along. I can do some more advanced techniques later on, but for most people who are trying or thinking about painting this model, I'm going to give you a way, hopefully, that you can paint it quickly, efficiently, and make it look cool for the tabletop. So the first thing when it comes to painting the Temenos is kind of to decide what exactly the thing is, because it's a weird looking creature for sure. And I was like, the labyrinth stuff that's like coming out of him, which is like all of the, geometrical shape like triangles and things like that. To me, that kind of stood out as being like rock. And it was like this rock creature like thing, maybe coming from the ground, I don't really know, but because it was creating these like structures, my feeling is that I was like, well, I'm gonna go for a more earthy stone look type thing, and hopefully that will cover it. I'm sure there's different ways, but that was the way that I was like, I'm probably gonna be pretty safe if I just do it this way. So what you need to do, if you're thinking about it in that terms, is then utilizing some particular set of colors or types of colors. So you want to use things that are like dark browns, grays, maybe some beige colors, maybe little greens here and there. And you're going to want to play with these types of colors. So if you've got a wet palette, get some colors out that you like that kind of help represent what you think rock would be. And we're going to get started with wet blending. So what you'll see from the start point is that I started with a primer black, just my general thing, and I tend to zenithal. And for me, zenithaling is just about getting a sense about where light is falling on it. You do not need to do this step. I just like to do it, and I'm kind of accustomed to working that way, so I start there. However, we're going to get a wet blending. And if you don't know anything about wet blending, I've got another video that talks all about wet blending, just in case. But it's a pretty straightforward system to go about. Firstly, once we've got our paints, then we've chosen what colors we want to work with, we're going to get a really big brush because this model is quite large. And so we're going to take our brush, we're going to make sure that it's loaded with plenty of water, but not like completely flowing with water. Get your paint, and then you're going to start dabbing that across the entire model. So to take into account what you're dealing with this model, we want to start really with dark tones, especially in the shadowy territories, and we want to put the brighter colors in the areas that are going to be closer to its face. Its focal point is kind of the big giant hole in his face. So we want to bring all the light onto the top side and put all the shadows into the underside. And because we're working with such a large model, wet blending is such a wonderful thing to work with here. So yeah, you can see that I start with like sort of dark green, earthy gray kind of tones, and I start sort of wet blending and working my way upwards from the shadows into, the top parts of the model. So once you've gotten the main coat down on the entire thing, it's time to start picking out the details. And so there aren't, luckily, too many details for us to work with, but there are some. Firstly, it's got all of these, I would say vines, but more like tentacle type things that are attached to the labyrinth triangle pyramid type things. And you need to pick a color, and whatever that color is, pick a dark version of that color and then build up an additional highlight of some sort on top of that. So that's a kind of a classic way of layering. You're going to take a dark color, do all of the tentacly bits, and I'm doing mine in sort of like a dark purple, and then I shift it up into a sort of pinkish purple kind of color. And that just gives me something that gives a little bit of contrast and away from the rocky kind of color that we're going for with the Temenos itself. So the dark purple that I'm using for the tendrils, I'm also utilizing that same exact color into the shadows of the model. Because we've wet blended the entire thing, there are going to be certain areas that are not quite right in the right locations, if that makes any sense. So you want certain areas, like especially places that are in deep shadow, to be shadowed. And so I'm using the same dark purple color and making sure that the shadowed areas are more muted. and kept around. So I'm just going around checking all the different areas and putting shadow, especially on the underside of certain things, especially the tentacle parts or just inside the body cavity area. I'm just darkening it with a bit of purple. I'm not really utilizing a layer here. I'm doing much more of a kind of like a glaze, but it's sort of in between a layer and a glaze. And I'm just doing that and punching it into the shadows. Once I have completed all of the shadowing section and all the dark purple color, it's time for the dry brush. So the dry brush I like to utilize is the round-headed bristle ones. They're just a bit more control, I find. And we're looking for a kind of bright gray color. So the bright gray color just means that it's a bit more like stone. You don't need to be professional with this type of thing. Grab it, and we're going to just hit all the areas on the model in which that we think that the brightest spots are. So especially near its face, because we want the focal point to be that big hole in his face, but partly his arm and maybe some of the tentacles and things like that in the background. Once you've done that department, then it's just now cleaning up and adding more color to the purple like tendril things that are existing that are coming from the labyrinth rocks. We just want to make them brighter and add it. And because we've dry brushed that kind of white gray on it, the purple pink color that we're utilizing pops a little bit more because of that sort of undercolor of the white originally. And right then and there, we're pretty much done. The only thing we've got to do is work on the hole in its face. And now the hole in its face is a tiny bit tricky because, well, it's inside, it's deep inside, and that's going to take a little bit of, well, it's just difficult to get to with a regular brush. Two things. If you have an airbrush, this will make your life much easier, and if you don't, then you're just going to have to utilize a brush. And either way, whichever one you're going to do, I would recommend spraying white inside there first. Get yourself a nice bright white, put it all in the inside, and then utilize a bright, strong, vibrant color. An orange would be good, a yellow could be good, or something along those lines could be quite nice. Maybe even a red. Whatever color that you like, you can put in there. But it'll be more vibrant because you've got that white undercoat. And because we want it to look like it's sort of glowing from the inside, I think that would be a good move. For me, I'm going to be utilizing my airbrush. I'll have probably sprayed it white first, then punch in the colors. You do have to be careful with the airbrush when it comes to this particular model. And the reason why you have to be is because it's got effectively, I don't know how to best put it, it's like a little dish, but like a deep dish. And when you spray directly into it, it actually comes right back out into your face. So this is one of those times where I think goggles and a mask is very, very useful here, just to keep yourself safe. So for most people, they could probably call it done. Here, you've got the inside part going to be a color, and you've got the general outside done. And I think you're good to go for the most part. However, if you've got an airbrush and you want to take it a step further, here is the next thing for you. So one of the really cool things about an airbrush is the fact that you can use it as a means of applying filters onto your model. And so a filter is effectively a glaze. It's just a thin layer of paint, which you can see through, but has a color. And so this is a neat thing we can do now is that we can add colors back onto the model to give it a cool sense of feeling and mood and, information and things like that, which just helps, add more value to the model. So for me, what I will end up doing is I have a bunch of inks that I really like. They're very strong, very vibrant, very powerful. And I will take them, I'll generally start with a brighter color. So I'll start doing with like a green or even a blue, but like a lighter blue. And I'll start spraying into the shadows, creating different kinds of like just color temperatures and shifting those throughout the model. This is definitely a more advanced step because you're going to need to get control of how much coverage you want. And we want it to be quite thin. So you need to be kind of comfortable with an airbrush, or give your model a try and just see if you can do it. Partly, when we were doing this particular thing, we were looking for mostly water, maybe a drop or two of, probably just a drop of thinner, and a bit of paint. Not too much paint. We're not going to really use it as a layer. We really want to reduce the amount. And so it would take multiple sprays with your airbrush to actually really put down any kind of heavy color on it. And if you can do that, then you're in a good place, and then you can go to town on your model. Colors, again, I like to work with like magentas, purples, and greens. And I think those 3 colors are really nice for the purpose of this model. I did a little bit of yellow as well, just on certain parts of the labyrinth-like area, just to play with and add a little extra color, which I thought was nice, but not super necessary. One of the things I realized in the art of the Temenos was that the Labyrintharos pyramid things were kind of glowing. They had like this sort of like glowing orange color going on. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Maybe I could do the same thing. And so I started giving it a shot later on as I was just sort of playing around with the whole model itself. And so I used a little bit of acrylic retarder, added some white together, mixed it. The acrylic retarder like reduces the surface tension, and so it helps flow more easily, which is perfect because there's lots of lines and I don't want to be like hand drawing every single bit of it. And I just took that and I started trying to feed all the lines. And as you do that, you wait for it to dry. And so what you've got is a nice white base. And then if you just throw on a bit of orange or a bit of yellow, you've got this quite bright orange yellow, which is perfect for the sense of glowing and things like that. So that's the kind of effect I was looking for. I didn't really like how it ended up, and it was much more time spent doing something just to see. In hindsight, I wouldn't do it, but it's in hindsight, and we all have 20/20 vision in hindsight. One of the things about having an airbrush or utilizing it is that as you're spraying over the model or you're putting these filters down, is you actually are subduing the colors that you got elsewhere. So I had to go back over the model a little bit and just pick out tiny little details to make sure that everything stood out properly. But it was just took a little extra time, but it's not really a problem. And that is it for the Temenos. Because it's such a big model, it's such a great thing to work on with wet blending and stuff like that and dry brushing, because it's like this rock creature, it's huge, and you can just play around with all sorts of different colors. If you've got an airbrush, you can add all these extra colors on top of it. If you don't, you can kind of do it with wet blending. You just have to be a bit more conscious of how you're operating. But it's a great way of testing out and just playing around with a model. One of the things that I wish I should go back on to fixing the model is I was trying to make the hole in his face brighter, and then I made it too dark. And it realized that I needed to go backwards and actually redo it. And as you look at the model at the very end, I kind of think I should put a bright spot directly in the center of the hole. So it looks like there's like real light coming from that area. So that's just something that I would add on to the model as a later addition. But otherwise, I think it's looking pretty cool. The Temenos is a totally terrifying monster in Aeon Trespass, and you know, good luck to all of those who go and fight it. It is a bit of a pain, but you can be victorious. One thing, and do not make the mistake that I made in this particular video, if you made it this far, is the Temenos has some replaceable pieces, partly because of the vantage point that you can do whilst in the game. And so, smartly, I didn't glue the piece that attaches into the back of him. However, I completely forgot to paint the vantage point. And I don't know if I'm going to be going backwards to be painting it at this point. So when you're painting the Temenos, just remember to do all of it and not most of it, like myself. And with that being said and done, I'm signing out. Happy hunting. Or is that what we do when we kill monsters? I presume we are. I don't really know exactly, even though I've been playing this game. It's a great game, by the way. But there you go. Until the next one. Adios, amigos. Oh, my word.